Welcome to the Greg Bennett Show, presented by Any Question. I'm your host, Greg Bennett, and I've just completed a really delightful conversation with a longtime friend of mine, Dr. Ted Forcum. And Ted, he's just been an amazing part of my career and my wife Laura's career. He kept us going, and it was a big reason of our longevity that we had in our careers, and just the body work that he did for us over the years. And in this conversation, we touch on so many things that are relevant for all of us to just try and keep the bodies going. We also look at the mindset and some of the traits of some of the champion athletes that he's worked with. He's basically worked with all the biggest names in U.S. track and field for the past 20 years. He truly is a guy that knows he's around sport, but also the biomechanics and the body. Really has been a gift for us to use as a part of our team for such a long time. I know I can't get to every question when it comes to Dr. Ted Forcum. There's so much there, but you can go to Any Question. He's on there, anyquestion.com/drted, Dr. Ted, or you can just download Any Question on your iOS or Android, and you can go in and ask him any questions, listen to the answers that he's already got, and go listen to the answers or ask other experts across the platform, anything that you want to know. But I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. I truly loved getting him on the show and just having this conversation. There's a lot in this one, so I think you'll enjoy it. And remember, success comes to those who endure just one moment longer. All right, today I'm joined by one of the greatest bodywork specialists in the world. His resume is truly immense. U.S. Olympic team head chiropractor, U.S. track and field world championships medical team, events physician for the U.S. track and field trials and national championships, U.S. Taekwondo, U.S. Triathlon National Championships, Nike Masters Games, U.S. soccer, figure skating, canoe and kayaking, and the list goes on and on. He's a diplomat of the American Chiropractic Board of Sports Physicians and a diplomat of the American Chiropractic Rehabilitation Board. He's a certified kinesiotape practitioner, Graston Technique certified exercise specialist, performance exercise specialist, and is a registered Trigenics practitioner. That's a mouthful. That was a lot. That was an absolute lot. But honestly, more than all of that, I've been blessed to have him as a part of my team for the better part of a decade. And to me, he was more than a bodywork specialist. He was a mentor and a friend. And it's an honor and privilege just to have him join me. So welcome. And thank you for joining me on the Greg Bennett Show. Dr. Ted Forcum, how are you, mate?
Doing great. Thank you so much, Greg. It's always great to talk to you.
Mate, it's been a little while. Where are you at the moment?
Let's see, I'm in Portland, Oregon, overlooking the city, looking straight north at Mount St. Helens.
Oh, beautiful.
And so not a bad vantage point where I'm at right now.
I've always loved going out and visiting you and just going for runs. I remember one time with Laura, we said, we were staying with you, and we said, we're going to go for a run, a little jog, and we ended up running for hours. It's just such a beautiful part of the world to put on a pair of shoes and just run through the forest. I love that part of the world.
Yeah, it's pretty green. I think at the time that you're out, though, the trails are dry, so it does give you a little bit different perspective than running and jumping, like hip scopping around mud puddles during a good percentage of the year, but I do love it.
Well, you and I think we first got connected about 2005, I believe, and I was seeing Dr. Alex Keith down here in Florida, and was having some feet issues, and he said, there's only one guy that you have to work with, and his name's Dr. Ted Forcum. And I was like, all right, I'll give the guy a call. And I called you up, and you were the kind of guy, you just said, yeah, Greg, fly out to Portland, come and stay with me. And I think I ended up staying, 3 to 4 days, I think, and you treated me in between patients. And we'd never met before, but you offered up, a room in your house, and that's just the kind of guy you are. I mean, was it just me, or are you doing that with all your athletes?
Well, you're definitely special, no question about that. But I have done that with a number of athletes. But you and Laura are completely a different animal than most people. And I think anyone that that listens to your podcast will pick that up quickly. I mean, you are so much fun to be around. And I kind of think about this whole podcast, and Greg, your brain has to be getting huge with all this knowledge that you're getting. I just listen to all the people that you're interviewing and all this wisdom that's coming out. I can't imagine. I was thinking about that too. You probably wish that you had started this podcast early on in your pro career, because you've gotten so many great tips on how to how to optimize and maximize your performance.
Thanks, mate. Yeah, it's been pretty interesting, the people that I've had on. I'd love to say that all that information is stuck. Unfortunately, my brain is not a sponge. I have to keep going through the process of training it. It's a bit like my athletic career. It's like it's a constant. But I have been absolutely, truly blessed with the amount of people, of just exceptional people that are willing to come on and have a conversation with me, and also yourself I put in that boat. And it was like, what really triggered me recently, you and I have spoken this last year going, yeah, we got to get you on the show. And recently, last week actually, beginning of last week, I picked up a book called Shoe Dog. And if people haven't read it, it's the story of Phil Knight and Nike. And it was just fantastic. I think I got through it in like about 36 hours and absolutely loved it. And I was like, with your involvement with so many Nike athletes, and the last time I think we were out there, you took me to the campus, the Nike campus, and we actually went and did a little bit of shopping in the store there. And it was fantastic. But I was like, after reading that book, I'm like, okay, now I got to get Ted on, because there's too many stars aligning. That's
a pretty amazing book for anyone who's kind of, I think to me, it's just an iconic history in sports influence in sports. I mean, just if you think about how Nike has changed the industry.
Yeah.
It's just massive.
Yeah.
Just massive.
It's not only a sports industry, but the entrepreneurial mindset. It's like this, for us, with Ed Baker and I, with At Any Question, and we're building this team and we're building this product and brand, and I'm like, okay, this is a must read for anybody on our team, because it's just the energy behind what they did and the passion in which they did it. Phil Knight was and Bob Bauman, his sidekick, they were just so passionate about what they wanted to achieve. And that passion just resonates all the way through the book. And he tells everything, and I love that, and all the struggles that went with it and everything else. But honestly, I'd put it as one of my favorite, top 5 sort of books. I just think it was absolutely fantastic.
One of the things I like about it is the fact that he discusses things that aren't necessarily favorable. So he's not giving you all the sweet goodness of the history of Nike.
Mm-hmm.
He discusses some of that, the downfalls, some of the things that, people may not look favorably on as well. So yeah. I think that's, unabashed honesty is fantastic.
Yeah.
And a lot of those people in that book are kind of people that I know historically. So to me, it's great to see the other side of the conversation, so to speak. So it's really interesting.
Mate, as I was listening for it, I was waiting for your name to be dropped at any one moment. I know you've been in that world for a while.
Yeah, no, that predates me. However, when I was in 6th grade, I would ride my bike to a shoe store and put away in shoes and laced shoes as a trade for Nike spikes. And so that was Blue Ribbon Sports at the time. And so it was kind of interesting to see that evolution going from ASICS, or at that time as Onitsuka Tiger, to what is now Nike. So is that transition of the Nike Cortez, that first shoe that came out, is pretty interesting. Given my first shoe was a Kmart knockoff of a Converse All-Star. That was my first running shoe.
I think we all had those. Actually, Laura and I were talking about the shoes that we first started, and I think all of us had those Tigers. They were those blue with the white stripes going down the side of them. The Nike, the Tiger spikes.
Right. Oh yeah.
The long grass spikes that were almost half an inch long, 2 centimeters long or something, and running on the grass fields with those. And then all of a sudden, it was this waffle racer. There was a waffle trainer, but these waffle racers came out, and everybody was just all about Nike in that kind of early to mid 80s, maybe mid 80s. I think it was really impacted me anyway as a kid. But I don't know. It's a fantastic book. It is one that I highly recommend people just pick up if they love sport, if they love business, if they love entrepreneurial. There's just so much in that one to unpack. So yeah, loved it.
Those Nike waffles impacted me in the mid and late 70s, with South Eugene being the first high school team to wear them, and they just crushed us in the state meet.
Is that right?
It's a muddy day, and they just it seemed like they floated on top of the mud, and a lot of people just they post hole in the mud and they'd lose shoes, and they just absolutely crushed everyone else. It was a dominating team.
That's awesome. It's so many great memories about all of those products. But well, let's do this. Let's start by rewinding the clock a little bit, which is what I love to do with really most of my guests, because I always enjoy the journey and just sort of understanding when you sort of found your passion for, chiropractic and bodywork and all the things that you're doing and how that kind of evolved over time.
For me, my high school coach kind of taught me, mainly he kind of guided me out of a profession. So I had interest in kind of going into teaching and coaching and he sat me one down, still remember the day. It was a cloudy, rainy day, which could have almost been any day in Oregon, I guess. I just remember in the locker room, it's kind of, I would run double. So I'd run in the morning, run in the afternoon, and he'd sit down with me in the morning and chat. And he wasn't a man of a lot of words, but he would sit down and say one or two, and it'd usually be meaningful. And, he talked to me about what my plan was out of high school and as a career. And I said, I'd love to go to, be a teacher and go into coaching. And he looked at me and said, "You'll be horrible at it." Like, what? You are going to be horrible at that job. You will be so bored that you'll go nuts. And that kind of redirected me a little bit. And so from there, I was fortunate enough to be part of a research project for a chiropractic student, which introduced me a little bit to chiropractic, but I really still didn't quite know what it was. He would just do soft tissue treatment on us before events, which was at that time was pretty painful and deep, which, you as an elite athlete, you've, I'm sure, gone through plenty of massage sessions like that, as well as treatment sessions, some of which may have been at my hands.
Yes.
So I had a little introduction to chiropractic there, but still really didn't know quite what it was. And I went to undergraduate college. I got sick and had to drop a class. And when I did that, my department chair, because at that time I was going pre-med, the department chair came to me and said, "Well, yeah, we'll let you drop these classes, but next quarter you're going to have to be our student athletic trainer, because we're starting a program and there are only 4 people in the campus that qualify for the program, and you're one of them." So you had to have what's called care and prevention and organic chemistry, and not many people had that combination. So that directed me into athletic training, which I was very thankful for, because I really loved that work as an athletic trainer. But part of that role, I had to follow around 4 different healthcare practitioners. And so I followed around a physical therapist, an orthopedic surgeon, a podiatrist, and a chiropractor. At the end of the day, I hate counting for people. It's kind of a petty thing, but I kind of feel like, wow, you're going to pay me to stand there and count. I feel like, people can count on their own if they're self-motivated. And I don't need to count your reps for you. No. I might help you count cadence. I have no problem with that. But, to count to 30, I feel like, they don't need to pay me a lot of money to do that. And the podiatrist I really enjoyed, but I felt that they were self-limited by just the region. I felt there's more to what's going on than just a foot and ankle. And the orthopedic surgeon, it was a situation, I found it really interesting. I think I have good skill sets for that. I like carpentry and construction, and orthopedic surgeons have good skills in that area. But the patient relationship was very different than what I was looking for. I wanted to be able to have more of an ongoing relationship. And I like the idea of performance care adverse to, changing out parts. The other thing too is that as working as a student athletic trainer, I'd send injured athletes off to get treated by these people. And the people that went to the chiropractor, I found, came back during the season, and then they were able to compete and have successful seasons, versus the people that kind of went the other directions, oftentimes that was the end of their career. And granted, some of them had a higher magnitude of injury when they, you're getting an ACL repair and so forth. But for some of the other conditions, I just found chiropractic just to be really effective. And that kind of allowed me to kind of dive a little deeper into looking at the profession and seeing, wow, it's more than just treating an injury. There are other ways of optimizing health that are part of the picture of bigger scope of chiropractic care. And you're kind of looking, most people think of it as just the spine, but really you're looking at the entire musculoskeletal system as well. There's a lot of neurology and physiology that you can dive into to get a positive effect out of a person. So I liked it. It's a never-ending journey of learning, which is the other thing.
Well, that was almost what I wanted to just ask you, because I love how you've just dissected and broken down to figure out that that's how you wanted to become a chiropractor. But you're so much more than, I don't want to say just a chiropractor, because that's not what I mean. I think being a chiropractor is exceptional, but you come across as someone who just loves to learn and is always curious and open to sort of new ideas. I guess, with that, how much has that mindset, benefited you going forward?
I think that's a huge component of success of anyone, really. There's a gentleman that I used to work for, actually in a shoe store, and he would constantly say the day you stop learning is really the day you die. And I truly believe that. And I think curiosity is a requirement for anyone who's going to be successful, whether it's business or athletics. You have to have that curiosity and drive, whether it's an athlete, just being curious to see how much you can push yourself. Well, what are your limits? Or as a entrepreneur to, being curious to figuring out what's a solution for, whatever problem presents itself. And a lot of people don't realize that they have a problem until some solutions have been presented to them. There's so many times that I've worked with a patient, they go, I had no idea that was a problem, that was painful there. And like, where did that come from?
You just need to be married, mate, and they'll point out all your problems.
Yeah, been there, done that.
Exactly. I was like, I didn't realize I had all those problems, but thank you for pointing them out.
Exactly. And yeah, there's constant learning there, right?
Yeah.
And you did very well with Laura.
Oh, thanks, mate.
Gosh,
I know I
tell
have.
You.
I get told that by all my mates consistently that I'm punching well above my weight, and I don't deny it. I don't deny it. I'm very fortunate.
But what a challenge! Laura is she's brilliant. She's so inquisitive and so knowledgeable. I hope I don't breach anything saying this, but working with her, I had to make sure I slept well the night before, because the quality of questions that she would, pump out there is like, I have to be on my A game with Laura every time.
I always feel for the practitioners on the other side. Laura comes very prepared, whether it's nutrition or body work or whatever. She's talk about a constant learner and wants to just know everything. I've kind of said a lot of coaches wouldn't like working with her because she'll question everything. If you're going to tell her to do a certain workout, she'll want to know why. And it's like, and not to say she's complaining about doing it, she just wants to know why. Why is it going to work? Why is this approach the right way?
I think that's a really important factor. I think that was a question on any question is that someone approach. And I really believe that. And, the word physician is kind of Latin translates into teacher. And I think that's a big part of our job. It's kind of funny. My high school coach steered me out of teaching, but at the end of the day, that's really a lot of what I do. I teach postgraduate for other doctors and physical therapists and sports practitioners. And I feel like that's what I do day in, day out with patients, is that you're teaching them the why. Because if you're like me and possibly Laura, you're probably not going to do what you're asked to do unless you know why. And it's a huge motivating factor. And to me, I always like to paint the picture of what's taking place physiologically with the patient. So kind of in their mind's eye, they can see or look at what their goal is, whether it's, auditory, visual, or tactile. So I'm kind of looking to find something that they can, wrap their head around that will allow them to see progression, change, and what their goal is in that process.
Understanding this kind of learning mindset, I guess how much of, the greats, and when I say the greats, you've worked with the greatest athletes on the planet. If everybody can just visualize some of the greatest track and field athletes for certain, you've had your hands on them. Can I say that?
Yeah.
in some respect, at a part of their career in either a proactive or reactive way, depending on where they were at their career. But talking more about, what did they all have in common? What are some of the traits that the greats have all had in common? Has there been anything, or are they all very different from each other?
I think they're different depending upon what event they're in. And, if we're talking about the sprinters, this is maybe a little more of a graphic description, but, we're all meat. Let's face it, we're all a different cut of meat. And the great sprinters, the texture of their tissue, it's like a fillet. If you think about going to a quality steakhouse and you can just cut a fillet with a fork, it's really interesting. Big, dense muscle, but it's the tissue of it. So if anyone barbecues out there, you know how you check the difference between well done and medium rare. And, there is they don't have well done meat on that body. It's all rare and medium rare. So in other words, their tissue is very pliable and very, very elastic. And, and you get into some of the other sports where, they're taking a few hits and there's a little bit more gristle involved. But the endurance athletes, I find that their tendon structures, it just amazes me how much energy they can store into their long tendon structures compared to the power masses that come out of the sprinters. But there's also huge differences in addition to the physical attributes, but the mental attributes are very different. Tons of bravado within the power sports and versus the endurance sports. And it was always kind of funny. I'd walk out into my front waiting room and there's a guy that's going to be on, seriously, it'd be like 2 or 3 cell phones at the same time. This actually, in my mind's eye, I'm going back to a specific incident. And then in the 2 seats over, there's a person who's reading this 500 to 700 page novel. And, not that, that's like the difference between your sprinter and your endurance athlete, for sure. It's kind of funny. Not that sprinters are not academic. It's just a different breed and different animal.
Yeah, they go. Yeah. Right,
exactly. It's like and kind of one of the other things that I think found was with all great athletes, and it's something that certainly when I was competing, I had no clue on, and that is the importance of recovery. Most athletes can train hard. Some never find that depth of how deep they can go, but most athletes can really train hard. I really think the key is how fast you can recover in between your sessions so you can train hard again. And I think of great athletes being like the lion in the desert. They go after their kill, they plow it down, and then they're just lounging around until it's time to go, hunt again. And I think that so many people that are not in the professional world don't recognize how important that recovery aspect is, getting quality sleep. There's a lot that comes into that sleep in terms of messing with your physiology. Getting a big bump in growth hormone through the course of the night is enormous for your recovery. But if you're not sleeping well, that bump is going to be mitigated or non-existent.
It's funny you mentioned that because I've just had Jan Frodeno on last week, and when I've had Jan's coach on, Dan Lorang, and Dan Lorang said, when I first started working with Jan, his physiology and his results were all very underwhelming. And then when I had Jan on last week, he said, my greatest gift is my ability to recover quickly. So he's able to get that more work in. So it's interesting when you now bring up the importance of recovery, that, if you want to keep turning up every single day, you got to be able to getting the things like sleep and nutrition and everything right. But there are some people that maybe at a DNA level are just recovering quicker and rebuilding quicker, do you think?
I think that's a huge part to it. I believe that athletes are both born and made. And there are a lot of great athletes. And I don't necessarily think that the greatest athlete gets the gold medal. And it's a conversation I had with Ed Ryan, who is a former medical director for the U.S. Olympic Committee. And we were talking about this. And, I think the great athletes are kind of the people that don't get in their own way. So they don't make repeated, we all make mistakes, but they don't make repeated errors. They learn quickly from their mistakes and what works and what doesn't work. They're not like a bee that keeps hitting the plate glass time and time again, and there's no change. But so many times that we'll see, a super, super talented athlete, just crazy things will happen. I've got one specific incident in mind. It's like, okay, right before the Olympic trials, they step on a Matchbox or a Hot Wheels car, like a kid's car. You have kids. So
yes.
Stepped on that, hurt his foot, slipped. Not that those things can be prevented, but it's like, if you have kids, you have to be, as an elite athlete, you have to be very careful how you move around all that stuff. It's not like the average person who can just, waddle through and, okay, I step on it. I have a sore throat for a while. But if you're talking about days before your major competition, that's your nut. That could be your cash holdings for the rest of your life. And you don't want to have stepping on a Lego or a Matchbox get in your way.
I had Mark Webber on, and I know you're a kind of motorsport fan, right? And, he's ex-Formula One driver for Red Bull and won Monaco several times. And anyway, good mate of mine. He came on the show, almost 2 years ago. I think COVID had broken out already.
By the way, that was one of my favorite.
Oh, it was?
yeah, it really was.
I got to get him back on. But the big takeaway from that episode was that the greats know how to adapt quickly and often. And and I think in that motorsport world, they're all trying to adapt, quickly and often. Whether that's in a race of itself or the teams are reacting and doing and rebuilding themselves quickly. And it was something that I actually took away a lot from that one. It was, there's been episodes where I think some of the guests have really talked about resilience and consistency, but that episode, it was really about the ability to adapt quickly. And from what you're saying, that's what you've seen with many of the great athletes you've worked with. They can adapt even if they tread on a Lego a couple of days before they figure it out, right? I mean, it's like, it's not perfect, but they can get going.
Well, and, that really, I worked for the PGA Tour for 5 years. And I think that comment really shines true, especially with the great athletes there.
Yeah.
You would see people who you just watch them mentally collapse over the fact that I'm going to pull out an example that's a true example that I witnessed. It's like I'm replaying it in my brain that I watched this guy completely unfold because a pine needle dropped on the fairway as he was putting. So his ball deviated. It forced another stroke. But that pine needle totally collapsed the rest of his tournament. He just felt like it was bad luck and it just spiraled from there. Adverse to persevering and pushing through, and it's like, hey, stuff happens.
Oh yeah.
You watch a triathlete and they get a flat. It's like, what do you do? It's like, you're an Ironman, you get a flat. Well, you take care of it and get back out there.
It's easier said than done, though, isn't it? It's funny,
my gosh.
You mentioned golf, and I think of golf and tennis. I like both of them because you have so much time in between your next move. Whether that's in golf, it's a new stroke, or in tennis, it's a new point, and you have to get yourself going. And a little side story, Laura and I play tennis a lot together now. This is what we get to do once or twice a week, and we're very comparable. We warm up literally for about 3 to 5 minutes, and then it's game on, right? And this is the athletes in us. And I like to put myself, we want to beat each other. We play for every point, right? And it's amazing how often we do come out very close to similar. And it's actually not fun if one of us is doing so much better than the other, which we've had those days as well. And we both go, yeah, that wasn't fun because one of us was off our game. But when we're both on, and it's just so much fun. But I find myself even in between points having to do that whole self-talk and, you got this. But if you go, I'm going to double fault this, you do. You immediately double fault. But if you can just get your head together, and this is just Laura and I playing with nothing on the line. I look at those sports where they have to reboot, get themselves back to neutral quickly. It's incredible to watch them do it. We don't have to explore that as much in triathlon. Once the gun goes, yes, we might get a puncture and things don't go our way, but generally you're in a groove compared to these sports where you got to get yourself back to neutral over and over again.
I will. I think of like Ironman. You're out there for a long stretch, and I think some athletes, you can get momentary mind wander, and then you have to peel your mind back. Mm-hmm. If you're not in a pack and you're off on your own, then I could see that being a problem. But I'm still stuck in the visual of you and Laura playing tennis together, and I just see kind of like a war out there.
She's amazing, mate. She picked the wrong sport of triathlon. She is such an athlete, and I know you've worked on her body, but in terms of athleticism, I'm a bit of a bull at a gate, and Dr. Alex Keith would call me the bumblebee or whatever, and it's like I love the hard work. I love taking myself to the edge and just staying there. But in terms of that true athleticism and the ability to move and reach and speed and just make it look effortless, that's Laura. I don't have that whole male ego thing with the man and the wife. I look at my wife and I just go, well, that's just pure athleticism there. And I get to watch it and get beaten up by her on the tennis court often.
Right. No, I can see that she could crush it.
Yeah, she
easily.
does. She's got those long limbs. And I think she's never going to make that. And not only does she make it, she does a cross-court winner. I'm like, what? A quick mini break just to remind you to go check out Any Question. You can download it at iOS or Android, or you can go to anyquestion.com/drted or /Dr. Ted, and you can find him there. How much of your, just shifting gear here a little bit, how much of what you do is sort of, prevention versus treatment, that proactive, trying to get more out of bodies versus reactive, where you're just trying to get somebody that's maybe had a bit of a falter?
So that varies depending upon, where I'm working. And so if I'm in a clinical situation, that's probably like, I would say 60-40 to 70-30, where I'm actually treating someone for an injury versus doing prevention. When I walk into a locker room, it's probably 50-50 when I go until it's like the day before an event. Then if I go day before the event, then it's a lot more, I call it tuning. Yep. So you're doing a tune-up and you're fine-tuning, making sure that all the muscles are firing, you have complete range of motion, you have good stability, good alertness. But then when we come down to, say, an event like an Olympic trials, it's probably in the range of 80-20 to 90-10 that is all performance care.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's actually how we would have utilized you, I think, with all those numbers.
Right.
Yeah.
And the performance care is so much fun. I mean, that really kind of drives me. I just love that fine tuning. It's something that, unfortunately, many amateur athletes never get to experience. There's several age groupers that I've, had the pleasure of working at that level with, but, it's just kind of getting that extra, 5% out of a muscle to fire or to activate on time. Athletes are amazing because they can perceive specific changes, especially individual athletes, not necessarily like a team athlete. I work for a hockey team as well. And, you do something really fine tuned and then they get cross-checked and it's like, well, what happened to the work that we just did? You just don't know.
Yeah.
But in triathlon, cycling, track and field, swimming, those sports, the athletes have such great body awareness. And I kind of learned this early on in track and fields. I had an athlete, a pole vaulter, came down and he was going, when I'm running down the runway, I'm feeling my right thigh drift out 5 millimeters on my knee lift. And, immediately I'm going, right. He was telling me what was wrong in his back because of it. And I'm kind of right. Like, sure. And he was spot on. I learned quickly that elite athletes, one, they've gone to some of the best people in the world. And two, they have such great body awareness. And actually that kind of drove me to the other concept and how I look at patient care too, is that really most people kind of have an idea what they have. They just don't know what word to put on it or how to deal with it.
Do you find some athletes have a better sense of feel than others? I mean, you're saying all elite. I'm certainly not one that has a great sense of feel, whereas Laura's almost the other extreme. Her sense of feel is off the chart. But I almost feel like we both benefit, and it's a benefit and a curse for both of us. Having no feel means I can be a bull at a gate and go, and I don't notice anything. I don't notice pain. I don't notice anything. I can just go until it's over. Whereas Laura notices, my little pinky toe's slightly out of place here and I need to get some work done to get it right.
Right. No, absolutely. It is kind of funny because there are a few of those differences. And I go back to the situation in the Beijing Olympics. I worked on 2 patients, the exact same condition, and asked both of them to go out and do a very similar run. And one came back and they asked them how their run was. And they've gone, during the last third of the climb motion of the foot strike, I feel my 5th toe slightly deviate laterally. So that, for anyone else, that means that your smallest toe, you're feeling it shift during what amounts to about 1/8 of your stride cycle, between your foot being in the air and your foot being on the ground. And it was just really precise. So the other athlete who had the exact same condition, I asked him, well, how'd your run go? And he goes, oh my gosh, Ted, you should have seen it. It was so beautiful out there. These flowers there in bloom. This path is amazing. Totally unaware of his foot, or even oblivious to what I was asking about, which was his injury. Just striking.
Yeah, I love it.
And, the thing is that, okay, so he's a person who's been a multi-world champion and gold medalist. And matter of fact, he medaled in those games. And, the woman was very successful in her event. She's a medalist and world champs. And, so you can be great, but I do think that there can be dangers in knowing too much. I think as an athlete, you need to know enough. But, knowing too much can make you overthink things. And that can, at times paralyze you from just kind of enjoying the day and going out. And you have this opportunity to do what most of us do for fun as a profession.
I know, it's so incredible that we, for many of us, we got to have that experience. But you're right, there's that whole paralysis by analysis type thing that just goes on. You're overthinking it. The anxiety increases. All of a sudden, that mental anxiety then affects the physical. Suddenly you got an Achilles injury you didn't even know about. And you're kind of like, well, how much of that was all the other stresses in my life? And personally, I believe they all correlate. I just, if you're in a happy place, if you're in a good spirits, if you're neutral in terms of getting yourself out of negative environments and just get yourself to neutral, it's amazing how the physical body can start to feel a little bit better as well. But that's a whole nother discussion. That's a rabbit hole we can go down. But
it's absolutely huge, Joe. I agree with that 100%. I think that keeping that mindset has a huge physiological play on you, as well as your physiological, the health of your body has a big effect on your mental aspect. So
absolutely.
They go hand in hand. Yeah. And there are only so many things you have control over, but learning to stress the things that you have control over and not stressing the things you don't have control over, I think is a big lesson that's a takeaway. So, when that flight gets delayed, you have no control over it. Hey, you're going to do what you have to do and take the next flight. It might get you the event a little bit late, but that's just, the way it is.
Adaptability. There it is. Control what you control, adapt and move on.
100%. And, sweat the stuff that are big that you have control over. Yeah,
well, you know about this year, last year with our little one with the rattlesnake bite, and how that just changed my perspective on everything. And I don't know if I think I did share it on this podcast at some point, so I apologize if people have heard it, but it was basically, my 3-year-old gets bitten by a rattlesnake, scariest week of our lives, as parents. It's just awful. And then I was meant to be going to Slovakia to commentate the Collins Cup. And I looked at my passport, it expired on the Friday before leaving on the Tuesday, and I was like, oh well, I guess I'm not going. And my perspective in the past would have been, freaking out. And now I'm like, whatever, my 3-year-old's alive and whatever, somebody else can do the commentary. I got it all sorted. It ended up being very smooth sailing in the end. And I think a lot of that was just my mindset as well. It's like, whatever.
That podcast, I got the backstory on the rattlesnake bite that I didn't hear from my side. So it was really, I thought it was fascinating. I loved it because, again, I got to see the other side of the picture from that story. And a lot of it, I had no idea everything else that you guys were going through. I mean, just mind-boggling. And I know this is a podcast, so listeners can't see Greg and Laura's children, but I just want to put a warning out there. If you do look up Greg and Laura's children, and see the family photo, if you're diabetic, you may want to reconsider because these kids are so sweet. They could put you in. Your insulin might need to get bumped up if you look at these photos. These kids are just so adorable.
I'm so fortunate. Our daughter looks so much like Laura, and it's like, that's so great. And
there are a couple of videos that she sent that just crushed me. It's like, oh my God, this is amazing.
I know. They come across in photos as adorable. They are adorable, but obviously anybody that's a parent out there knows that, boy, being a professional athlete was tough, but being a parent of a 4 and a 2-year-old is brutal. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to change anything, everybody. I do love it, but it's for everybody out there parenting. I'm with you, man. It's got its ups and downs. But
so now I've got a question for you. So what lessons from your pro career have you taken into parenting?
I think the biggest one, and I touched on this earlier, is, that consistency. So the key, just keep showing up. And then I think we also touched on it as like, don't sweat the small stuff. It's like, I said on an episode a few weeks ago, my mum used to say, I just want to get you boys to average. I was one of 3 boys. Just want to get you boys to average. And I was always like, as a high performance athlete, that sounded like a terrible, way to look at life. But,
right.
But I do think there's something about that of lowering the expectation bar a little bit, and being able to step over it a little bit more consistently. Stop trying to get your kids to perfect, and just little steps of improvements and things and learning. But honestly, just keep showing up, be present. That's a big one. I think just done is better than perfect kind of mentality. It's like lower the expectations.
I don't have kids. I have a dog, but I do work with kids. So I see parenting, and I love public health and the aspects and youth sport safety. But one of the things that I kind of think about is that, as an endurance athlete in particular, you're going to be points in your race where you're feeling really horribly, and it feels like everyone's like running away from you, and then you cycle back and they go through their horrible cycle, and you start to feel like you're crushing it again. And I just feel like I see my friends go through this with parenting as, times when they've got some pretty big lows with their kids. And I think as an athlete, that you can come back from that and actually,
That's a really good point. I was actually just chatting with Laura this week about that. It's like, I go several nights quite often where I only get between 3 and 6 hours of sleep. Now that's either because of me or the kids getting me up or whatever it is, right? And my mentality is, this is why I don't, wear sleep measuring devices and things, because I look at weekly sleep or every sort of, how much sleep am I getting over a week or 10 days? And if I get a few 7 or 8 hours in there every now and then, well, then my makeup sleeps and they get me back to neutral. I know that I can get, like even today as we record this, last night I probably got about 4 hours broken sleep. And you just go, yeah, but I'm going to feel fine today. Tomorrow I could be a bit tired, so recognize that. If you can grab a 20-minute nap in the day, you'll be fine. Having that kind of a mentality that don't draw massive conclusions for one day. It's like, it's all encompassing. It's the training you did for, weeks, months and years that matter. And it's the same with sleep. It's the same with parenting. It's like, just, you can keep kind of just, don't write off a day just because you had one day of bad sleep. Or, that kind of a mindset anyway. I
completely agree with that, because there are so many athletes that don't sleep well the night before competition and go out and crush it.
Yeah, exactly.
And, but that, 3 to 6 hours of sleep, that just reminded me of like working Beijing. Like 5 weeks of a long night was 5 hours, and it was a long haul. Yeah. But if you're getting that limited sleep, I just think that you'd hit it on the head is that, okay, I'm going to get a 20-minute nap in there during the course of the day. And so finding some place in that course of the day to regroup, I think is super important for capturing that. And I think we talked about that too. I use a PEMF device, which is a pulse electromagnetic frequency mat. They have these things that you can lay on as a whole bed. You also have them to where you can use a high-powered one to treat specific injuries. And I kind of use that to cheat that recovery system. When you lay on this, I would describe the physics, but it's a little hard to describe over audio. But in a nutshell, what it's going to do is circulate polarized items in your body, and the most polarized, element is going to be oxygen. So it's going to move oxygen around through your system without the requirement of cardiac output. In areas that maybe have limited circulation, it's going to help move that around as well, which limited circulation areas are usually those that are injured.
What was the name of that? We were talking about that a few weeks ago. You mentioned that to Laura and I. What was the name of the website or whatever? You need to go check that out. I've forgotten.
There's a couple of them that have devices like this. IMRS is one of them. The other one that I have both, and the other one I have is through Oxford Medical. It's called an Omni. But there are a variety of products out in the market. Beamer, they came out of Europe. So they're very popular in Europe, went into horse racing, which I hate to say it, everyone, but most great advances in sports healthcare comes out of veterinary.
Yeah, I've heard that.
You have horse racing, and so there's a lot of treatment techniques and modalities in particular, not so much with, the use of your hands, but of technology. A lot of it comes out of veterinary and horse racing. And so this one's very popular that way. And I was introduced to it kind of back in Beijing. And to be honest, initially the thought of, it's magnetic. And I had to sit on a advisory panel way back in the day and talk about magnetic therapy. And so the word magnet just kind of turned me away. But since I was told I was in charge of it, I was forced to look into it. And this back in 2008, I did a lit search, which is a literature search for peer-reviewed research articles. And at the time, there were over 30,000, and which is pretty substantial. Not pretty substantial. It's really overwhelming. It's a huge amount. Now, of that 30,000, I didn't consider there to be like any great quality studies, but the volume of them and the consistency of them, gave it a lot of good validity. But as you come back to PEMF, I just found that it's cheap, safe, and is a great way to kind of cheat the recovery system. So it helps circulate oxygen, helps get the tissues reoxygenated, move circulation around. It can affect brainwave patterns, alpha, beta, delta, and theta brainwaves. Both of those respond to whether you want to upregulate someone, make them more alert, or downregulate them and get them into recovery mode and kind of get them into a vegetative state. So you can kind of play around with it for whatever your goals are, or you can just bring them through all 4 cycles and make them feel like they've had, a good night's sleep.
That's awesome. And, well, what I might do is have people, they can always jump on the Any Question app, your DR Ted, Dr. Ted on the Any Question app, and you can even show them, if they want to ask you questions about that, you can show them what you're using and how to use it and that kind of thing. That'd actually be a great question. I'll encourage everybody to go check it out there. If you got questions more about the PMNF mats and stuff, maybe ask you there. It'd be good because then you can show it. Yeah,
it's really a different thing. But I during COVID, it was fantastic because it's a great way. During the pandemic, you really want to try to maximize your immune system and not get to the point where you're really going too deep in the tank of fatigue. And I guess no one knows that more than you right now, huh, Greg? I think you had a pretty good bout of it.
Yeah, we've had it a couple of times, yeah. Is it much like we've had suggestions that we should be getting in the infrared saunas. I've had the dry sauna conversations, the infrared saunas. Is it doing the similar kind of thing, or are they totally different?
In big picture, yes, there's some similarities in terms of how it aids your recovery and physiology, but it's a different mechanism.
Right.
And so, at the end of the day, you get kind of just like, if you eat food of any type, you're going to get a similar result, but if the quality of the food is different. And so I definitely like the sauna, and I like the ice bath. I think that combining the two is an amazing way to add recovery. And especially for kicking out, that ice bath is really going to kick out some white blood cells. So I think that's a great way to, speed up your recovery as well as improve your immune system.
I love all of that. I haven't been very good about it. I'm not going to lie. These last couple of months, I'm like, we got a lot of catching up here to do, and just getting the infrared sauna, the ice bath, potentially having a PMNF mat, and I think there's so much that we can be doing just that it will help us just get to. I love this word, neutral, but just getting the body back to a point that is healthier across all spectrums.
I like all that stuff too, but the reality is it takes a lot of time. So unless you're a pro athlete, and it's hard to fit all that in, and then you have to have a sauna, it takes up space. You have to have the electrical set up in your house, and then you have to have your ice bath, and that takes a great ice maker, or convert a box freezer into an ice bath somewhere out in your yard. If you're not living in a place that has that accessibility, it could be tough. But fortunately, the PEMF mats, they've gotten to where they're smaller in size, so you can actually cart them around and fly with them. So from an athlete standpoint, it's easy. Also, it's a great tool for a traveling athlete to get back on the time zone. So that's one of the really things I like about it, because it does kind of like I find that it can help you get back like a day or two early to hard training when you're shifting time zones.
Oh, I'm going to try that one. That one seems the most accessible for all of us. Actually, on that, let's nudge into, things that athletes, that are listening right now, and there's a lot of triathletes and runners and even motorsport, everybody's listening. But what are some key things that people can kind of do to just keep their body moving? You're an expert in areas, like I said in the introduction, taping and Graston and all these other massage. Dry needling, is that one? I mean, and I think even I've heard you speak about the BFR, the blood flow restrictive type training. What kind of things would stand out to you that you're like, okay, people should kind of lean into these areas if they want to sort of maintain or even improve, the way their body's moving?
Well, I think that you kind of talked a little bit about it when you talked about the saunas. Like, part of it, there's a lot of really amazing technology out there and some new things, but then you have how accessible is it? How easy is it? Can you put this into your normal routine? I think there has to be a lot of reality in life. And, whether you're, an elite athlete who's traveling, so you have to have something that travels easily. If you're like everyone else in the world, then you have to have something that you can work around with family or work or and your training schedule. So I really think that kind of some of the basics. And I used to also work for Major League Soccer, and I thought they had a great policy. So every athlete that didn't foam roll got charged $50. So not that you need to have that level of motivation at home, but a foam roller is very inexpensive. It travels easily. If I'm traveling, I'll use a hollow one so I can stuff things inside of it. Just being able to, I call it the early identification. So you can foam roll out, especially after you're traveling, you want to move circulation around. So that's where you're kind of rolling up and down and doing what would mimic effleurage or long strokes that move fluid around. So it works great with fluid dynamics and getting, swelling and lymphatic fluids that are gravity dependent to shift around in your body and get back into circulation so you can process it. When you find tender points, then I like to have people hold on to those points until they relax and then stretch that muscle.
Easier said than done.
Absolutely. That takes a little more motivation, right? Because you have to have that as your legs twitching and looking like a dying frog on the carpet. But those are some of the great areas, and there's usually some key points for most people. If you go statistically, everyone's sitting. So now you have some areas that are going to be tight on you, which is usually going to be your hip flexors, your calves, your chest and upper back. To work the foam roller into those areas, I think if nothing else, if you don't do anything else, hitting those targets on a consistent, regular basis is huge. And we kind of looked at, you hit on the point of what do the greats typically, what do they have in common? I've noticed that the greats are all people that I've worked with anyhow, that they just did this stuff second nature. You didn't have to be told. They just, would just pull it out and just start rolling around. I think the Med Kefleski, I think, was the person that I saw doing this. We're in the middle of a camera shoot and he just pulls out the foam roller. It's like, yep, time for me to foam roll. And he just carries on the conversation, signs autographs with people going by while he's on the foam roller. It was brilliant.
That's awesome. I love that. It's for me, it's funny, because I was kind of the athlete that was it almost got in my head a little bit. I was like, these athletes that are constantly doing these little things. I'm like, can't we just relax for a second? For me, it almost worked it worked against me. And I can say that now because I'm retired, but it was like, I always felt like I should be doing more, and it's like, I don't have the energy for that, because it does take a bit of energy, but the ones that can get into the habit of doing it is, and we talk about that word habit, you can do it without even that you realize you don't even think you're doing it. Like we got in the habit of doing the trigger point roller stuff. So, the calf rollers and the quad rollers.
Right.
And I to the point I had to do it before every run and every bike. It was almost like my warm up, to just soften up the quads and the calves. And it truly worked. It truly worked. And it was affordable to do and it was easy to do. And we did it every single morning for probably a good 15 years.
It's an absolutely, great product. And, for listeners at home, it's a great way to manage it.
Yeah.
I use that in my car while I'm driving.
Yeah.
But so, I'm manipulating that around. I'm trying to get, you only have so much time in the day.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think the key thing that I saw with those guys is they didn't stress it. So if you miss it, so what? Just pick it up. But, they didn't stress that it has to be done, or it just was something that was so casual for them. It just flowed right into their routine. Yeah. So it wasn't something that they had to like really think through what they did on each and every session. So I think that, foam rolling and trigger point's a great way. It's an inexpensive way but more importantly, it's an early detection system. So you're going to find things that, oh, wait, this is starting to, this has never hurt before when I've rolled across this. And now it's been painful. And so it can put it onto your radar that you either need to manage this a little bit better in terms of soft tissue work, or maybe, take a little time off. I'm going to say something that amateurs, if you're an amateur, brace yourself, you might have to take a day off. And that's one of the big differences between amateurs and pros is pros are actually pretty good about taking time off to recover. Yeah. And amateurs absolutely stress it out. It's just amazing. And so I always bring up the point of, and ask them, it's like, well, so how much money do you make by doing that, that run or that triathlon? And they're like, there's like nothing. So like, well, if the pros who make a lot of money doing this don't stress taking a day off, why do you? And so I try to get that perspective in there. No, I like that perspective. It's easier said than done again. It's one of those things you kind of, I was somebody that I don't know if I had many days off in sort of the 27 years I raced. I had very light days. The way I learned with my body that it actually, I would find even if it was just a sort of a 1 mile run walk around the lake, or I'd even call it popping more than running. It was like just that kind of a thing. Or a dive in the pool and just swim. I would swim 500 meters to a kilometer, which when you're swimming a lot, that doesn't even sound like it's worth doing. But I found just doing that on my days off was enough to keep the blood flow going and the body moving. Very rarely did I take full days off because I actually was somebody that used to be fairly bound, that I noticed it a little bit more. Laura took more days off than I did, and she responded well to those days off, whereas I needed to always do that tiny little bit of light work. And I think that's going back to, like you talked about earlier, about every athlete knows their body and they're all unique and different, and what works for one doesn't always work for the other. Everyone has their own, some athletes do, say for example, Tour de France, some athletes do well coming after that day off. Some of them do horribly after that day off. It's true, isn't it? Yeah. I'm a big proponent of active recovery. Yeah, me too. So on that day off, that's going to be doing something that's very light, very casual, or maybe something different. Yeah, exactly. Just a completely different activity than you would normally do, but just don't power through it. Yeah. And it's a good point. So I think it's, I just think that active recovery is a great thing. There's one stretch we haven't talked about that I you've talked about the rollers and things like that, and I don't know if you were the original one that really got me doing it, but the Psoas Pnf Stretch. Anybody that might be dealing with any kind of sciatic nerve pinch or for triathletes for sure, the Psoas is such a powerful muscle. We develop it so much in the cycling, and we're in that cycling position that our hip flexors get quite tight and short, and then you have to stand up and run, and if that psoas and hip flexors are tight, you get all sorts of issues, whether it be sciatic. I think a lot of Achilles injuries are because you've sort of you're so tight on the front end that it gets overstretched on the back end. And I did notice on any question you answered, somebody actually asked you, what's a good stretch for sciatic pain? And you mentioned that, really opening up the psoas. So I just wanted to drop that in there as we talk about things that we can all do to keep our body moving forward. At the end of the day, a lot of things that we, you think, you're going to stretch what hurts, but really at the end of the day, a lot of times what hurts is the symptom and the cause is maybe on the opposite side. And I feel like that's almost 90% of the time. Maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration, but I feel like Laura and I, the way we actually treat it, be like, I'm sore here. And we're like, okay, it must be the other side. Like we tend to have that mindset. We always go to the opposite of whatever it is. That's actually, I'm not sure what the percentage would be, but that's going to be pretty high. You think of like upper back pain while you stretch your chest. Exactly. And hip flexor is a big catch for a ton of things, particularly for cycling and triathlon. And the other thing with triathlon is just that tight hip flexor. now you have that tight hip in the pool. Yeah. And so how much drag that you're creating by dragging around a hip pelvis, which is just taking up a lot of fluid dynamics to push water around that butt that's up in the air. So going back to the foam rolling and doing the trigger points, like you identify these areas, and those are areas that are really easy and effective to then put kinesiology tape on, because kinesiology tape on tight structures are really effective for increasing tissue length. And so if we go back to that, when you're talking about PNF stretching, which is kind of the gold standard in stretching, is on hamstrings, it shows if I recall, the study showed as 108.7% length change. And it's most effective for a 2 to 3 minute span. So it's right before you're going to go out and compete. PNF stretch, absolutely. But if it's longer than that, then actually, surprisingly, putting tape over it shows a 129.6% length change, which is just astronomical in terms of the amount of range of motion, which changed our whole concept, well, at least changed my concept of what happens when we're stretching. Because I used to think of we're taking the muscle follicles that act in myosin and we're linking it or separating them. And now what I think is happening is that we're getting a neurologic response, and that neurologic response is allowing us to move in what we perceive as a safe range of motion. And it's kind of funny, Greg, because I'm sure you don't remember this, but years ago you talked about some of the differences between chiropractors and physios, and Australia versus the U.S. And the Australians are really big into neuro, and that kind of made me look in that direction a lot more. And I think about that whenever I think about, wow, there's all the neurology that takes place with the use of tape.
That's fascinating. Well, hang on. I just want to go back to those numbers. 129%. That has it been looked at by WADA and performance enhancing? I know it's not a drug, but does that come under the umbrella of performance enhancing? Well,
if you look at that, then you have to kind of step back to our super shoes and the swimsuits. And
yeah.
I was involved in the swimsuits back in the 2000.
Yeah,
I worked with Nike and JanSport with the panel designs on the full body swimsuits, and at the end of the day, Speedo really championed that and came out with an amazing product. But it also was too amazing, and it was banned at the end of the day. And part of why it was banned is it's so expensive. If we're talking about in the late 90s and early 80s, a swimsuit was going to be $4,000. And not everyone can afford that.
Well, plus they started interjecting. There was neoprene. They had like 1 millimeter of neoprene in these suits, and they were truly, these speed suits were. Yeah, we were able to wear them for a while, even in triathlon after they were banned in swimming. In some of our events, and so I always had one of those neoprene, 1 millimeter suits, even for a non-wetsuit swim. It was like, you're crazy not to.
Right, they're oxygen filling, so you float so much better.
Oh, yeah.
And then you have the compression, so it reduces turbulence off of your breast and butt. And some of those areas. And then you get the benefit of the parallel elastic fibers of the material. So that material will aid your endurance, your proprioception, which is your ability to feel where your body is in space. You can use it depending upon how you apply it to also increase some strength too at times. It just made ridiculous changes in performance, and at the end of the day, it got banned. And now we're looking at super shoes.
Oh, tell me, hang on, let's talk about those super shoes, because my experience in them is like, man, it's unbelievable. The difference. It's
pretty crazy, and it's kind of funny because I'm looking at one right now on top of my file cabinet. And when I first saw that, I thought, this for your mechanics in particular would have been a great. This would have been a game changer for you.
It would have been a game changer. I hit the ground so hard that any rebound effect would have been. My timing isn't perfect on the ground, but I hit pretty hard, and it would have been absolutely. I probably could have got injured. I would have needed your help to make sure I had the right, the right shoe and the right fit. But unbelievable.
Well, they also create a little bit better transition, so that roll onto the forefoot.
That's right. It's like a 10 mil drop or something, isn't it?
Right. So for you, that might have been good. And what would have been interesting is see how that would work for Laura, because you and Laura have
complete opposite,
very different mechanics.
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure if it would quite have that same benefit for Laura. The difference with the super shoes is that they're a lot more cost, achievable. So a wider breadth of athletes could afford them. Now, here's the other question, though, is like I think at the end of the day, a smaller breadth of athletes would benefit from them.
Is that right?
So, I just question, I don't know, there was no research out there to state this, but I question how beneficial it would be for some of the age groupers that are, say, running, say, a 6 or 7 minute mile pace.
Of course. Yeah.
Maybe like 7 or 8 minute mile pace and that are maybe in a Clydesdale category where they're heavy. And
well, that's about me these days. All of what you just said summarizes me. I agree. I don't think putting me in a super shoe right now is going to help my 5K any more than probably just doing some training for a few months might help. So.
Right, exactly. But I think some of those people are just going to crush it out. You look at the geometry of an elite athlete, which is what these are designed for, and it's a much different geometry than someone who's like my age and has a few extra lbs on, and they're running substantially slower.
I love it, mate. Well, I feel like we've covered a lot today. What's next for you? What do you got coming up?
Let's see. Next up for me is a Prefontaine Track Classic, which is in Eugene. It's one of my favorite events. It's the premier track and field event in North America. And so I'm excited to play around with that. We just had a premiere of a documentary on sports chiropractic that kind of surrounded the Prefontaine Track Classic. So there's a little history. So that will actually come out at the end of the month too. So
that's
kind
cool.
of excited about that. Yeah, it's really fun. It goes through a little bit of the history of chiropractic, how it came about. I mean, it really, goes back to Babe Ruth era. Babe Ruth's athletic trainer was a chiropractor, and then it goes back into, people like Dwight Stones, the high jumper, and some of the great athletes of the 70s that were willing to boycott and because their chiropractor wasn't allowed into the Montreal Olympics. And
wow.
So it touches on a lot of that and both different perspectives, as well as a lot of our current athletes are going to be featured in there. And to be honest, it's really remarkable because the athletes were really wanting to be a part of this, and their sponsors were willing to waive a lot to allow their athletes to be a part of it.
That's
so it's really
cool.
kind of
I can understand that though. It's like if they'd asked us, you and Alex for sure, you were so much about our team and any success we had. It was because of you guys. It's like that ability to keep showing up, to keep turning up and get more out of yourself. We can't thank you enough. I mean, honestly, it's our careers and the longevity we had was, largely in part because of you and obviously Alex Keith here in Florida. And, so we appreciate you guys so much. So it doesn't surprise me that you got athletes sort of jumping to and saying, hey, we want to be a part of this episode, this show as well. That's cool. I love it.
It's a fun experience. And I tell you, working with athletes like yourself, it's so much fun on the practitioner side. It hones our skills and it allows us to practice at a higher level, which I think in turn comes around to help a lot of other people because I sharpen my skills on an elite athlete that I feel like at the end of the day, it helps me become a better practitioner and I think a little bit more out of the box. Working with an elite athlete, you have to be a little bit of a MacGyver. You've got to figure things out, especially if you're working at an event where you don't have all of your equipment available. So you've got to, maybe come up with little solutions. I mean, there are times where there's one marathoner where I treated him by taping a quarter underneath his insole. And he got through the race, and it was hilarious because he came back later on and he brought me a roll of quarters. He goes, yeah, he got a little interest on that one.
that is awesome. I love that. I mean, the MacGyver type thing. I mean, for the young folk out there, that was a great TV show of the 80s. MacGyver, he always came up with very clever ways of solving problems.
Right. Well, they have their own new version on now. It's
do they really? There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. I've missed a whole generation of TV. But mate, Ted, thanks so much for coming on and sharing just all your knowledge and your journey. And again, like I said earlier, thank you for everything you did for Laura and I over the last, 15, 20 years. It's been a real pleasure, mate.
Well, thank you so much. It's always just amazing and enlightening to chat with you, and I've been super excited to follow your journey through the Be With Champions podcast. It's just an amazing depth of people that you have. I just love it.
Oh, thanks, buddy. Well, everybody, thank you for listening. You can actually go to any question, download any question. You can find Dr. Ted Forcum on there, and you can ask him any follow-up questions there. He's already got so many great answers on there. You can go check them all out. You can also go find all the show notes and timestamps and links and everything at bennettendurance.com/media. All right, Ted. That was awesome, mate. Cheers.
All right. Cheers, mate.
Thanks a lot for listening. If you enjoyed the show, your support would truly be appreciated. You can visit the Patreon page, or you can subscribe with your podcast app of choice. Don't miss the next episode, so subscribe and be notified. For show notes, if you want to know more, please visit bennettendurance.com. I'm Phil Liggett, and on behalf of Greg Bennett, here's to the next time. And I hope you will join Greg again very soon.